Well, hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend and associate Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal, where we try to get some kind of idea of these classical virtues and connect them to modern society and try to at least understand, if not show, why these things are important today, maybe more important than ever. Zoe, it's great to have you back. Last time we talked about the sin of lust and that the corresponding virtue was chastity or abstinence. Today I want to talk about gluttony. And the virtue that is associated with preventing that sin is temperance. It's the ability to moderate your behavior. Uh, when we were talking about lust, you said there's nothing wrong with the sexual attraction, and so you also said that there's nothing wrong with eating. So when does just enjoying food become gluttony in your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what, man, speaking of gluttony, and I'm going to be talking, forgive me, folks, if I talk really fast because we're trying to pack in thousands of years worth of
Yeah, what's the problem?
philosophy and perspective in 15 minutes. So if I have a little gluttonous or speed talk and trying to pack it all in, please forgive me. But and forgive me, by trying to be cute, I forgot what your question is.
No problem. At what point does just regular eating and a good appetite become gluttony?
It's when you're going back for when your seconds becomes like a fourths, I suppose. When you're eating to a point of, it starts to make you feel sluggish. When you're looking in the mirror and I mean, but some people can just eat and eat and eat and they're not gaining a pound. Oh, I can't stand these people, Bill. And when we talk about envy, I guess that's the other thing that we'll get back to is when we're looking at envy, and you envy these people who are able to just eat as much as they want and not gain a pound. But gluttony is just one of those things. Who can measure like what gluttony is if you're doing it to a point where somebody's like, say, hey man, you didn't save me any cornbread. If somebody's constantly saying that to you, then I guess you might be a glutton.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Um, it seems to me that a reasonable definition of gluttony would be continuing to eat something or consume something when you're no longer hungry. When it becomes an end in itself, it's no longer either serving a need, the need you have to maintain your body, keep some fuel in your body, or even the pleasure of eating, which is certainly a real pleasure, and delicious food is wonderful. But when you go past the point of being satiated, when you are no longer hungry and you continue to eat, now we're on the essence of what that particular sin of gluttony is, and the virtue associated with it is temperance. And as we've discussed before, these virtues all seem to be forms of mental discipline. There comes a point when you can say, yes, I love chocolate milkshakes, but 6 of them in an evening, every evening for the rest of my life, is not going to do me good. I know that to be true. On the other hand, I love this food. I think it's delicious. And so why should somebody stop eating or consuming something? What is the virtue of temperance? What do you get out of it?
Well, it goes back to when we talk about gluttony, and you mentioned the key word, satisfaction. Even satisfaction can be a very arbitrary term. What is this measure of satisfaction? Who's to say what's satisfactory to somebody? Once again, that's why the word talks about people will be eating and drinking and giving unto marriage, because they're going to be seeking fulfillment in these things. They're going to be seeking this line of satisfaction. A person eating until they're reasonably satisfied. Well, what's reasonably to them? So if a person feels like they're justified in eating something to their satisfaction, whatever that measure is, who can tell them that? Once again, that comes down to this measurement, this legalistic approach to what we think is satisfaction. What that comes down to is what the Lord says. The Lord says, in me, you no longer hunger, you no longer thirst. It doesn't mean that a person's not going to be hungry and thirsty, but the thing is, you're not seeking food to fulfill you now. You're not eating to satisfy some emotional void or anything like that. You found me, right? You have found the real food. You have found the real drink. Now from there, when you eat, you're not looking to just eat and eat and eat until you've satisfied some emotional void.
That's it. I think that's it. I think that the definition of these classical sins is allowing sensation that comes with having a human body to overrule, and therefore, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like gluttony among the other sins. It's almost like it saturates you. It consumes so much of your attention and so much of your desire and so much of your all of it, that that it leaves you no room for higher purpose. And this seems to me to be this recurring theme with virtue, is that these disciplines are there to make you happier. It's a hard thing to understand, which is why we want to talk about this. It's why the show's called The Virtue Signal. It's hard to understand why it is better for you to finally come to a reasonable point when you should stop eating something that's delicious. It's better for you if you stop. And this is an acquired habit. It's a discipline. And that's why it's a virtue, because it's hard. None of the virtues are easy.
Of course not. And of course, as well with food, this can translate into many things, where gluttony even itself becomes an institution. It becomes policy that people are going to end up being ruled by, because you have a culture that is gluttonous and feeling that they're always entitled to more seconds, right? So, even when it comes to, and that's when we get into things like you can't legislate morality. Right. Mm-hmm. It's not about legislating morality. It's about legislating against immorality. And one thing that is immoral is when people have this gluttonous mindset where they feel like they're entitled to the things that you have. That it doesn't matter if it's, food on a table or the food on somebody else's table. If you think that you're entitled to it and you're always wanting more and more of it, this is a mindset that translates into policy. And you're right, Bill. It's one of those things that you just at the very basic level of what's on the table and what you're going to take is something that needs to be learned and disciplined. And you do that by the counsel of the Lord.
All right. So what about this idea then of looking at gluttony as medication, as painkiller, specifically as a painkiller, where people, you hear in addiction, you hear people talk about self-medication, and people will not just use drugs to medicate themselves. They won't just use drugs to kill the pain. They'll use alcohol to kill the pain, or they'll use sex to kill the pain, or they'll use gambling to kill the pain, or they'll use food to kill the pain, or whatever it is. But gluttony, like lust, is an addiction. And the problem with an addiction is that it owns you and not the other way around. Mm-hmm. And people who are considered in the traditional sense gluttons are using almost always food, but it can also be consumption of a kind. They're using consumption to cover up a very significant hole in their spirit that food is never going to fill.
Mm-hmm. That food will not fill, that drink will not fill, that drugs will not fill. And a lot of the strange thing about this, Bill, is that a lot of people do such things because they want to show how in control they are. I'm in control of my eating. I'm in control of my drinking. I'm in control. I mean, I've been around enough drug addicts to know that a part of the reason why they do it is to show that they're in control. It's like, I can control my high. I can control my drinking. And even that in a sense itself is a show of gluttony, because they're gluttonous for a sense of control, and they don't know when to stop. And these are things, these disciplines that we have that we think that we can make for ourselves, they usually don't pan out very well.
No, they don't. And if you take a look at let's just go with the cartoon example of gluttony. You've got a fat Roman emperor on a toga. He's sitting in a vomitorium, mm-hmm. which in itself is the perfect definition of what gluttony is.
Yeah.
You have a procedure where you love to eat so much that you eat until you're full, and then you go throw up so that you can eat some more. Mm-hmm. And you've got this fat, grotesque, weak individual. Oh, peel me a grape. I see the savages are chopping each other's heads off. Oh, very amusing. But what you really get to when you get down to that cartoon gluttony is that sense of just perpetual intake, no discipline, no control over yourself. That's where I'm going with this. There's no self-control. And all of these sins are different areas in which humans do not have control over their behaviors. And because they don't control their behaviors, they are not only unhappy for themselves, they make other people unhappy. Hence the virtues like temperance, that are hard to do, but are necessary in order to prevent you harming yourself and harming other people.
That's right. And once again, Bill, we get back to that concept of empathy, right? It's like everybody should have a halfway adjusted person should have that sense of empathy to know that, hey, what you're doing is costing other people. It's affecting other people. But, people will try to chalk that up to saying, oh, it's a victimless crime and nobody's really being harmed by what it is that I'm doing. Who am I hurting and all that sort of stuff. People will make these justifications for themselves. And that's a big part of what sin is. Sin is basically when it's one of the biggest engines of it is when you justify your sins, when you try to make as if what you're doing isn't really harming anybody. And even if I'm harming myself, what's it to you?
Yeah, that's right. And I have an attitude about these sins, and gluttony as an example. I have the same attitude towards them as I have towards the lottery. So just bear with me on this one. I've known many people who, let's just say for the sake of the argument, they had a strong desire for something that's attainable. Let's just say a jet ski. Okay, and they really want a jet ski, and they're not making a lot of money, so they go and they put $1 into the lottery, and they say, when I win the lottery, I'm going to get that jet ski. Mm. My problem with the lottery is not so much the wasted money or the resources. My problem with the lottery is that by putting your trust in this piece of cardboard that is not going to happen, it's just not. That by putting your all of your focus onto this thing, this win, this possibility, you remove yourself from taking the concrete steps necessary to actually go get a jet ski, which would be things like maybe getting a second job or increasing your education so you could make more money. The lottery becomes a crutch for a lack of action that could actually get you the results you want. And the reason I bring that up is it seems to me that people who are gluttonous, whether with food or over-consuming anything else, are spending their time trying to fill a spiritual hole inside them that these material things will not fill. And the damage is that because they're so obsessed with these physical things like food, for example, they don't ever put their resources into solving the problem that is their real problem, which is a fundamental either spiritual emptiness or whatever it is they're medicating and running away from. The food becomes a crutch that not only harms them in itself, but deprives them of looking in the directions they need to look at in order to address the things that are making them eat so much in the first place.
Sure. And, and bringing that back to as far as lotto goes, or any sort of, we're going to sound like some real fuddy-duddies here, but, the gambling thing, even with lotto, it's a form of idolatry. It is a form of paying this tribute to this idol that you think is going to reward you for this tribute. You're putting your faith and you're putting your resources into constantly feeding this thing to detrimental levels. But once again, the sell is, but who am I hurting? I play lotto. So what? What's the big deal? I play lotto, right? And these things can, really interfere with a person's life. And just like you said, it's like all that time, that faith, that diligence that you do into doing this, you could have actually been doing the more redeeming things, to get that jet ski that you want. That would be a more practical approach.
Right. So if you're so busy eating, and the food is providing you with a pleasure that is medicating the immediate pain. Now you basically, it seems to me that any of these vices of the flesh, it's kind of like a methadone addiction. It's like you're getting just high enough so that you don't go through the withdrawals, but you're certainly not being happy about it. You're not enjoying the experience. It's bad for you. It's killing you. And I guess what it comes down to is that we live in these two worlds as human beings, right? We are clearly animals. There's no question that we're animals. And when people condemn gluttony, I like to point out that there's not an animal species on the earth that when presented with an unlimited food supply won't consume every single one of them. You can, from chimps to bacteria. If you put an endless supply of food down, those animals are going to eat all of it. That's what we're built to do. But then we get into the other aspect of the human condition, which is the ability for us to modify our natural impulses,
right,
in order to reach a higher level of happiness.
Right. Indeed. That is the thing that separates our ability to have a sense of consequence, our ability to reason, have these rationales, to see the cause and effect of things, the risk, the reward, all these things that we're able to, conceptualize and reason on. We're able to do those things because we see the effects that it has. But the thing is, another thing that we have is a sense of denial, right? So we can go ahead and deny what these things are doing to us. And if we see pleasure in it, Bill, it's a hard sell to tell somebody
It is.
that, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's like, what's wrong with it? I like it. Right? If I like it, it can't be wrong. And if doing it is wrong, I don't want to be right. We make songs about stuff like that.
So just to conclude this episode with the actual virtue, we've been talking about the sin of gluttony, but the virtue associated with that is temperance, is moderation. I just had a thought listening to you, and I realized that if you don't have temperance or moderation, you don't enjoy food as much. In other words, if you are the kind of person who has the discipline to stop eating when you're no longer hungry, food tastes better to you than somebody who is consuming it all the time. It's exactly like any other addiction. I've read a great deal about these things, and I've spent a significant amount of time with drug addicts myself too. And the one thing that just seems to be again and again and again is that there's never anything like that first high, and they will spend the rest of their lives into their early graves trying to pursue that first high experience. And the problem with addiction of any kind, including gluttony and lust and all the rest, is if you are addicted to something and you are not able to walk away from it, you are forced to always increase the intensity of the experience, right? If you're a glutton, you're no longer satisfied with beef stew. Now you have to have, boiled, hummingbird wings, there's no end to it. And so temperance is the ability to stop yourself so that you can enjoy it all over again the next time.
Sure. And yeah, that cherry high that everybody, we have a strong sense of nostalgia. We love those things where it's like, this the first time you experience something and we want to pursue it over and over again. That's a natural thing. And once again, it's not a bad thing, but when you're consumed by it and you're seeking fulfillment in it, that's when it becomes bad. And that's where that temperance comes in to say that, hey, you know what? In me trying to pursue this over and over again, what am I sacrificing to do this? Because that's what it comes down to. You're making these sacrifices, these unredeeming sacrifices to pursue something for your fulfillment. And one has to know, hey, you might want to put this in check. But who do you tell, and how do you tell somebody this is where you should draw the line? For everybody, that line can be totally different. That's why I say for myself, okay, Lord, how do I do this? Oh, I don't need to just keep on eating because I am fulfilled in you. And I know that it doesn't please you to just keep on eating and trying to be satisfied, or keep drinking, or keep trying to drug up. Not supposed to be, because the Lord says, love me all with all your heart, mind, and strength. Kind of hard to love the Lord, your God, with all your mind if you're high. But, so these things, if you have the fulfillment in that's a standard. That's what we're looking for, right, Bill? We're looking for a standard.
That's right.
Who among us can actually draw out this standard that withstands all the ages? None of us can. There has to be one fixed and immovable standard that we can square this by. And you do it by love, not by some arbitrary law.
Beautiful. For those of you who may be wondering what this has to do with politics, you really have to identify the root problems in our society before you can address them. And you can look at things like drug abuse or high levels of unmarried teen pregnancy and all the rest of it. And you can look at the symptom and you can say, oh, we've got to solve this teen pregnancy issue. But the entire idea of what we're trying to do on this show is to get down to what is the actual essence of the problem. Because then you can start to look at the problem in a way where you're going to be solving the actual disease, going at the disease and not after the symptoms. So we'll continue to look at these virtues one by one, these classical virtues anyway, and then we'll start to figure out how we can start applying these things into the daily life of America in 2021. And so God knows there's a lot of work that needs to be done out there in this regard.
Yes, indeed. The work is ongoing. As I sometimes say, we're looking for peace of mind, and the fight for everlasting peace is everlasting, and that's in the hands of one. And I'm looking forward to him setting the record straight on that.
All right, then. That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal. It's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, and a special thanks to the new members who joined us in our membership drive and made these extra programs possible. For Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time right here on the Virtue Signal.